Shirley from Humpty Doo who's calling in saying, I've just seen lights in the sky.
Eavesdroppin.
Well, hello, Michelle.
Hello, Geordie. Now, if you're thinking this sounds maybe a little roomy, it's because it is.
Echo.
I'm in a different space. I'm in a different room. It might sound like I'm in a cathedral, but I'm not.
She's a travelling bilberry this week, aren't you, Michelle? You're here, you're there, you're every bloody where. You're just up and down the country of Australia as we speak.
But is it bilberry like a dag? Like basically
Yes.
a piece of shit hanging off?
That's absolutely right.
I'm a travelling piece of shit. Thank you so much.
Oh, guess what? Guess what everyone's doing right now?
What?
They're eavesdropping on our
Oh my God.
conversation. And you're Michelle.
Oh my God. And you are Geordie. And we are Eavesdroppin' the podcast. You're listening in on us, which makes you an eavesdropper.
Yes, we feel so happy that you are. A little bit sorry for you, but also really ecstatic that we've got someone to listen to us because we just want to be heard. Just need to be heard, God damn it.
We do. And I have to tell you, I have been staying with Mum.
Jen the hen.
Jen the hen. I did realise Jen listens to every episode, but does she?
Does she? Jen, can you hear me? Jen, I'm speaking to you.
Jen? She does like to pop a little podcast on as she drifts off to sleep.
Oh.
And it's funny because I heard her and I knew she had eavesdropping in and she was like, oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, oh, really? She was talking to us. There's no one there. She talks back.
And then you heard a snore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 10 minutes in and she's like...
But do you think that maybe the squawking and screeching that often happens at different points during the episode might wake her up? I would not recommend this as a sleepy time podcast.
It's really not. There's nothing that is going to lull you to sleep unless you're Jen. Although I did hear her guffaw and cackle. So that was also a good sound.
Although it's passed the Jen test. I'm thrilled and I'm very sorry that I couldn't see Jen. I love Jen.
Jen's a goodie. She's a good egg.
She's the good egg. She's even Jen the hen that laid the egg in the first place. Well done, Jen. Multitasking.
She is indeed.
Well, so far, so good. I think we've given everybody, if you're a new listener, for example, you might be thinking, what the fuck is going on right now? But I think we've given everyone a good old taste of what's to come. Don't you think, Michelle?
Yes, I do. And it's eggy.
It's quite
eggy. It's an eggy taste. It's eggy.
Speaking of eggs, I need to give an apology on behalf of both of us, Michelle.
Is this about the methamphetamine?
No.
Because I did look that up and I got amphetamines confused with meth and amphetamine. They're the same.
Are they? Speed is meth. Is that right?
Well, both of them are amphetamines. It's just that one is methylated.
Oh.
And one is not. So one is more pure. Meth, aka ice.
Yeah.
Super pure. Speed, it's all cut with shit. So it's same, just prepared differently.
That's our first apology. It's Apology Corner. Here we go. Apologies from me, apologies to you.
Why do I always sound so Australian?
Because also last week, Michelle, we were asking people if they wanted to go back and listen to the other episode on our website, eavesdroppinpodcast.com, about the lady that solved her own murder. It wasn't
oh my God, we got her names.
Terramita, or whatever it was that you said.
We got her names
A lot of different names. It's
we did.
Teresita Berra. Bera is her name. And if you just put Teresita in it. Yes, it is, because I Googled her.
It's not.
What is it?
I swear to you. No, it's not. Hold the line, caller, because I just did the show notes for this.
It was a spell check because I did this research on the train. It could be a spell check error, Rory.
Your fat fingers press two different
I
things.
let my fingers do the walking and the talking. Exactly.
Not that you have fat fingers, but everyone does when they're texting in a hurry. Teresita Basa is that fucking name, and we both got it wrong. Sorry, Teresita.
Sorry, Teresita. She's dead.
But she's a ghost that solved her own murder, Geordie.
That's right. She is. Yes. So be nice about Teresita. Have some respect. But listen, there's another apology here. about your story about the baby alien, because I also Googled that because I thought, I want to see a picture of that, because you did say that you were going to post a picture, put it on the socials. I'm glad you didn't, Michelle, because actually it's not a story about aliens at all. It's a story about human tragedy.
What?
It was a malformed baby. They've done the tests. Yes, it was. And then after it had been discovered that it was a baby that was so badly deformed that it couldn't live, it was wrapped obviously carefully by the mother or whoever, and wrapped it and carefully kept it because it couldn't even feed or anything, and put it in the cave to be found. And then it had been hocked and sold as a strange artifact. It's human. It's very sad.
Do you know what, though? I'm very happy that you found that. It looked like a typical alien or a bird. But the fact that it's actually someone did a test, if they just do some tests, and like I said last week, if they've got this cake alien, if they've got this stuff, do a fucking test. If it's chicken bones, I don't mind. I don't mind if it's a chicken bone. I just want to know.
Michelle won't complain. She just needs to know. She doesn't like it when she's in the dark. She's in the dark. She doesn't like it. No one likes it.
No one likes to be in the dark. Don't put baby in the corner.
Don't put Michelle in the dark. Don't put Michelle in the cave. That's it for my apologies. How about you?
That's it for my apologies too, because we get shit wrong all the time. And actually,
time.
In the show notes, I often am like, whoops, and I put the correct link.
Well, you won't get those unless you're a patron.
That is true. And you can support us. You can throw us a dime.
You can buy us a coffee every month, which will help us to research our fabulous stories.
And maybe get it right. And we love it. We love the love. We love that you want to show your love with a bit of coin.
And you just go to patreon.com/eavesdroppin, I think, is what you do.
That is it. And if not, you can go to any of our socials or
social media.
Yeah, websites, and you'll see
Instagram,
all the links.
Eavesdroppin_.
Yes.
FaceTime, I was going to say, but it's Facebook. Eavesdroppinpodcast.com or something like that.
Eavesdroppin Podcast.
Just remember not to put the G on the end, an apostrophe instead. That's what we do to make us different from all the other eavesdropping podcasts, of which there are a few, Michelle. Eavesdropping at the movies is one.
Eavesdropping at midnight always comes up. It's like, fuck you, fuck off. I don't want to eavesdrop at midnight. I want you to be eavesdropping, apostrophe, no G.
At all times.
At all times.
Speaking of our gorgeous patrons, though, we've got a response from one of them. We sent a little message out to Safka, our white witch and television recommender.
Yes, she is.
Who got back to me about the crows. Do you remember last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about me having 100 crows on my roof? Like fat toddlers walking around up there. Then they flew off and then they came back and God knows what was going on. Well, she says, crows symbolize transformation and change, especially spiritual and emotional change. And Michelle, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have got slightly different colour in my hair.
Yes, you do. You've got a little
like a peach.
I love it. You're a real peach.
That's my transformation and change. And then she goes on to say, Safka says, they are believed to be cleansers of both land and mind and can be seen as a sign of good fortune. Then she says,
oh, I like that.
So that is exciting for you. Kiss, kiss. Oh, I love her.
That is wonderful.
Thank you, Safka.
Do you think it's just you personally, or is it going to be eavesdropping as well?
Yeah, it's time. We will be entering once again in the British Podcast Awards.
Oh, yes.
And
true.
When it's time for you to start voting, we will be asking for those listeners' choice votes and all your friends and family. Thank you.
Yes, please. So look out for those links. We will definitely be posting those.
Now, going on to, I just mentioned how Safka is a great television recommender. We also had a little text from Janica from Amsterdam who said, ghosts, because I asked about, had anyone watched Ghosts? So I asked listeners to get in touch. There's two versions, the American, the English. Which one's better? Well, Janica tells me, Ghosts, love the show. It's definitely for the family. UK one is the original and good. Leave the US one, shit, in brackets. Thank you, Janica.
Thank you. I often think this. The Office, I thought, British version, fantastic. American version, take it or leave it.
Maybe if it was a different show with a different name and it wasn't like a direct rip-off, it can be just as good. I haven't watched any of the American versions of anything, so I'm not going to say. But I will say something about some television that you and Safka had recommended, and my husband and I have now completely smashed all of it, as has the rest of the fucking country. Yes, Baby Reindeer is all the rage right now. It's been talked about a lot because obviously here in the UK, we realised, no spoilers, by the way, but it's very easy to find the people in the based on true life story that is Baby Reindeer, which is essentially all I'll say about it is that it's a true life experiences of an up and coming or struggling comedian who worked in a bar. I have it on good authority that it's the Hawley Arms in Camden.
That makes sense.
And what happens to him? He gets a stalker. There's a lot of other things that are involved. I'm not spoiling it by saying that. And you said, was he brave? Or no, Safka said, how brave was he to actually tell his story? Now, having seen it, and again, not giving any spoilers, we did say we'd talk about it. I'm just going to say something about trauma responses, because you said you had a lot of questions. And I'm not, for those who've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those who haven't, you can bear it in mind when you're watching. Trauma responses. There are 4 Fs. Okay. Your body cannot control the responses. It will, it's not a choice. So it's fight, which is fairly obvious. Fight is conflict or fighting back. Flight, which is escape or running away. Freeze, which is dissociation, where you've just gone into somewhere in your head. Your body's there, your mind's not. That's to protect you from extreme trauma. And fawn, the response that a lot of children or people who are smaller than their persecutors might find themselves doing, which is placation or going along with it. Yeah?
Yes.
So these things you can't choose. In retrospect, a lot of people with trauma look back at the experience that they had and blame themselves because of their trauma response. And what they don't realize is you can't choose it.
Okay.
And that's all I'm going to say.
I think we talked last week about how it did take a dark twist that was quite unexpected. You think it's all about this stalker, and then it just goes left field to a place where it makes sense of why his responses to the stalker were the way they were. But what happened to him, and for him to speak about that trauma, is, I think, in Safka's words, brave.
Yes, but I think... Well, I want everyone to watch it first.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, all right, okay.
Right in.
Right in.
So that's enough of that. So speaking of Netflix, though, do you remember I also said that I had to ditch a show that I was really looking forward to watching, which was 3 Body Problem? Well, the reason why I raise it today, Michelle, is because I gave it a thorough slagging 2 weeks back, basically, and I couldn't finish it. Never mind. But it's based on a trilogy of novels by Chinese physicist Liu Sheshen.
3 Body Problem.
And it describes a future based on quantum mechanics and astrophysics. So in my humble opinion, it's completely indecipherable as a TV series. And also badly acted, like I said before. The lead characters are all scientists.
Yeah.
And aliens are coming. And that's all I'll say on the matter. But this week's episode, Michelle, we're visiting, or are we being visited by aliens?
Well, funny, you should ask that, because I'm looking at UFOs. I'm looking at pictures. I'm looking at conspiracies, the lot.
Great.
Well, I hope so, because I did a little digging around the internet and found a few stories. But before I get into that, as you know, I'm in Australia, and I found this story that was a bit weird. Apparently, it has been reported that Australia's military has lost its X-Files, i.e.
What?
every single fucking report ever lodged of UFO sightings across the country, they've vanished, Geordie. They're gone.
That's weird.
Really fucking weird. So apparently the Sydney Morning Herald, which is an Australian newspaper, contacted Australia's Department of Defence in 2011 under a Freedom of Information Act.
Which you can do.
Of course. They were well within their rights to ask to see this stuff. And they asked for the X-Files to be released. And they had a few specific things they wanted to see. And the Department of Defence dug around, had a little search. 2 months later, they came back to the Sydney Morning Herald and said, sorry, we have none. We can't find anything.
Oh, dear.
It was fucked. The only file that they could find The only file the Department of Defense was able to locate was a folder called Report on UFOs / Strange Occurrences and Phenomena in Woomera.
Oh, Woomera, that's a
military
base.
weapons testing
Military base.
range. Yep.
We've talked about Woomera before.
It's connected to Maralinga. It's that whole...
But also we talked about it because do you remember when I discussed the man who had his photo of his daughter in a field developed?
Yep.
And there was a massive, great big spaceman standing behind her, or was it his wife's frock? It was on front page news globally, and some people who were working in Woomera saw it, and then they said that's what we saw when we were testing things.
Yes.
We saw the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, Woomera is one of those places where Australians have always heard about Woomera, don't quite know what's going on there, but essentially it's in the centre of Australia's outback. There's nothing else around it. It's military weapons testing range.
A Woomera is a weapon in the Indigenous terminology.
Really?
Yes, a Woomera, like a boomerang, is a weapon that you can fell kind of big animals. Like where a boomerang might down a kangaroo, which is what it's designed to do. It's not just for showing off and selling to tourists when they come to Australia.
Yeah.
The Woomera, you throw it around your head on a string. I can't remember, but
Bloody
yeah,
hell, I did not
I've seen
know
a
that.
demonstration of a Woomera.
Oh, wow. Okay. I had no clue that's what it was. Well, either way, this one report is all that's left of Australia's X-Files. Everything else either lost or destroyed, which obviously the Sydney Morning Herald found super sus and basically said, is this a fucking cover-up? Because by the 1970s, UFO sightings had become so commonplace in Australia that the Royal Australian Air Force, RAAF, they had the responsibility of investigating UFO phenomena. Well, they got to the point where they had so many people calling in about seeing stuff in the sky that they had this kind of pro forma questionnaire that they gave to members of the public who reported seeing a UFO. So there was a lot of reports, but they're gone.
No.
Everything is gone, supposedly. But the one that survived is from Woomera. And I did see that Woomera file. And it's kind of sketchy. There's not a lot of info, but it essentially is a confidential report that goes into detail about sightings on the 15th of July, 1960, of a UFO near Wewak, if I'm saying that right, which is a nuclear weapons testing range about 24 kilometres from Maralinga Village, South Australia.
Okay.
This document outlines an investigation into reports of UFO sightings in the Woomera prohibited area. And this goes from 1959 all the way through to 1963, where more than 40 top secret nuclear weapons tests that were codenamed Vixen were conducted under tight security. So apparently the reason the investigation was pretty comprehensive was the government was developing a space program at the Woomera rocket range between 1952 and 1963. And the British government was also conducting nuclear tests at 3 sites in Australia with the support of the Australian government, which was Woomera, the Montebello Islands off the coast of WA, Western Australia, and the Emu Field at Maralinga in South Australia. And I think you actually touched on that in a previous story.
The weapons testing episode.
Exactly.
Bikini Atoll and Maralinga.
Yeah.
Which is from a couple of years ago.
It is. These UFO sightings were pretty common during the Cold War. So from 1945 all the way through to 1990. There were theories that the UFOs were spy craft from the Soviet Union, but this report was maybe a little bit different. And scientific experts were called in who said the UFO sightings at Woomera could be anything from flying saucers to satellite cones, meteors, could even be the side effects of static electricity on weather balloons or a reflection of some kind of distant vehicle. So kind of bizarre. I don't know what to make of it. Except, what the fuck happened to all those files?
Yes.
Were there really UFOs at Woomera? Is this the same thing we always talk about in that the military always seem to see stuff like this? But in this case, what have the Australians done with it? How is it possible that nothing has survived?
When did it go missing?
They found this in 2011 when Sydney Morning Herald asked for it.
Who was the Prime Minister at the time?
Oh, good point. John Howard?
Oh, okay.
Liberal government? Maybe?
Right.
I think.
It wasn't the evangelist then.
Which one? Which one's that?
The evangelist. We did a story about who the bloody hell are you? That guy. I can't even remember his name.
Oh, that one.
The God Squad guy. What's his name? He's like the last Prime Minister before the one that they've got at the moment.
Scott Morrison.
Scott Morrison. We've all forgotten him. It may not necessarily be a message from the top. It may be that, I don't know, they're trying to cover something up. And I guess that's what it looks like, right?
It does fucking look like it, because if you can't find even one report of Shirley from Humpty Doo who's calling in saying, I've just seen lights in the sky
and a weather balloon.
So where the fuck are all those reports? Come on. It's so ridiculously sus. I think they could turn up. Oh, I found this in the garage.
Yes.
They
didn't
are.
make it in the office move.
But look, staying in Australia, I thought I'd look at a UFO sighting that is not military.
Oh.
So, Geordie, I'm going to throw on my Nirvana Nevermind t-shirt
Okay.
and go back to 1993 when a guy called Eric Thomason managed to snap 2 UFOs above Maslin Beach in Adelaide, South Australia on March 10, 1993. Eric says he was down the beach just looking at the waves when he saw this UFO rise out of the waves and fly towards him.
Oh,
yes.
God. No, not in my beach. No.
Yes. And he says he saw this UFO coming at him, and then moments later, he saw a second UFO, which was much smaller and flew up to join the first one.
Oh, fuck.
Eric apparently spoke to a magazine called UFO Sweden about what he saw. And I have to say, it is a bit confusing when I was reading this, but I'm going to try and unpack it. So he says about the first UFO, quote, I saw a development at first glance on the water and something resembling the tower on a nuclear submarine rose.
Oh.
This guy's language is like, is he Swedish or?
Or has it been translated from Australian into Swedish?
From
and then
Australian.
back into English?
I don't know.
Some fucking giant bloody pokey thing came up out of the bloody waves, came at me like a bull at a gate.
And I thought, that's a fucking submarine, mate, if ever I've seen one. So I don't know, but it's a very strange language. Yeah, so he's seeing something coming out of the water.
Rising up like the tower of a nuclear submarine.
And then he goes on to say he thought he might get abducted after seeing this UFO because he'd read about alien abductions. So he kind of moved away so he wouldn't be so easily seen. And he managed to take a picture.
Wow.
And then he says he saw another object and he snapped a second picture, but it moved to one side and then these things moved all around. And he said the smaller UFO moved towards the bigger UFO. It stopped. It then went upwards and into the bigger UFO.
Oh.
And then he says, as the bigger UFO, which now has basically the baby one inside, he says, I could feel water dribbling from the craft.
Ew. Oh, I guess that's normal because it came out of the water, so that makes sense.
But how close must it be?
Yes.
I know, and it's
very
the word
shocking.
dribbling. Dribbling is like a yucky
That's
word.
what threw me.
I know, it's
Yes,
a horrible
it was yucky.
word. Basically, he's saying he saw 2 UFOs, he got pics of them both, he felt water coming off them as they flew off above him. I have to say, I have seen these pics. Some people say, oh my God, they're the clearest UFO pictures ever taken, ever.
Really?
And some people say, what a fucking hoax. And I feel like they do look a bit shit. Picture this, a 1980s McDonald's Happy Meal. Do you remember when they used to come in these crazy shaped kind of containers?
No, Michelle, because I lived in a very small town. We didn't have McDonald's in the 80s.
Well, I worked there. Not in the 80s, actually.
Yes,
What
you
did
fucking did.
Oh, my God, I think I did. Oh, showing my age. Showing my fucking age. Can I just say, I actually saw my yearbook from year 10, Kaylin High. I've got acne and braces and I've got a big McDonald's M coming out of my fucking head. I mean, I think it's because everyone knew they could come and get free shit from me.
Were you like the coolest girl in the class because you worked at McDonald's?
Yeah, I could give them all a free sundae. Come on.
Defined by your workplace. I love that.
Oh, it's so tragic. I'm not convinced by this. The guy who interviewed him, this Swedish guy called Klaus Svan, he also thinks it's a bit of a hoax. And he actually did like this comparison where he got this bit of plastic ventilation from a boat and then compared it to what the pictures are. And he's like, look at this. But Eric says it's real. And there's a guy called Scott Brando who runs a website called UFOofinterest.org, who basically says Eric faked the whole thing using kind of old school models.
Oh, that's disappointing.
And look, and if you zoom in on one, you can actually see there seems to be a bit of fishing line between these two UFOs. So look, I'm just going to post a link on the Patreon. People who are on the Patreon, they can have a look and see what they think and please write in. But sadly, to all the Aussies who are hoping for the clearest picture ever of a UFO taken by Aussie, I'm just not convinced.
Not happening.
Soz. But speaking of models, I came across an article where a UFO researcher called Russ Callahan says he thinks he solved the mystery of Rendlesham.
Oh.
Yeah. And that it never had anything to do with aliens, but that the supposed UFO that was seen was actually a capsule made by humans.
All right.
So for anyone who needs a quick update on the Rendlesham incident, in the early hours of December 26, 1980, favourite decade, 3 US officers based at RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk in the UK saw a triangular-shaped craft landing in nearby woods. Now, before I go any further with this, Geordie, I have to say I could not help myself. I looked up what was on Top of the Pops, Christmas edition, 1980, because we're talking December 26 here. And it is amazing and shocking at the same time. It's amazing because they had live, aka miming, performances by Dexy's Midnight Runners singing Gino.
Oh, Gino. One of my favourite songs. I love that one.
Oh, I love that one
and
too.
And you know, the saxophone player in the Gino version of Dexy's, we met him. His name's Steve, and we went travelling with him in India, me and my 2 girlfriends.
Oh, lovely.
In 1990 or 89. And he was also in The Bureau, who only had a #1 hit called Only for Sheep that was massive in Australia.
That was huge.
Only for sheep. Yeah, when you're a sheep.
That was a brilliant song. Australians love anything to do with sheep. Takes them right back to the outback. Oh, give us my sheep.
So that's my claim to fame with Dexy's Midnight Runners and The Bureau.
Well,
we travelled for a little while with Steve the saxophonist. He was a lot older than us.
Well,
yes.
I agree with you about Gino. Oh, Gino. What a song. One of their best. Yep. Also live, aka miming, was Sheena Easton doing
My baby takes the morning train.
Exactly.
Stupid.
They also had Leo Sayer.
I think my mum loved that song.
They also had Leo Sayer doing Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah. I love you more than I can say.
Yes, my mum also loved Leo Sayer. It was the year that the 80s kind of forgot, wasn't it, 1980? It wasn't quite as cool as the rest of the years, music-wise.
Wrong.
Oh.
Because other videos on that very same Top of the Pops Christmas edition included Atomic by Blondie.
Okay, that's good.
Ashes to Ashes by David Bowie.
Fantastic.
Don't Stand So Close to Me by Police. And Super Trooper ABBA. So it is fucking chockers.
Okay, what a year. I take it back.
Do you remember I said it was amazing and shocking at the same time?
It's shocking.
This Top of the Pops. The shocking part is they had a special guest to introduce the Top of the Pop records of 1980. Guess who it was? Jimmy Savile.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Really grim. And that's the thing. At the time, I'm sure they were like, oh, we got Jimmy Savile. And now it's like, oh, fuck. Jimmy Savile. So that was 1980.
Okay.
1980 with a bullet.
Yes, #1 with a bullet.
Rip Snorter.
What? It's a rip snorter.
Rip Snorter. Look, back to Rendlesham. So these officers, they saw weird lights. They saw a UFO in the woods. They also had this strange thing happen to them where all their communication systems went offline for 40 minutes while they were in the woods.
A bunch of guys saw an actual UFO with small people in it.
They did. And it came towards them in the woods. They said the UFO was oval, it was dark in the middle, it had red around it, it had sparks coming out of it.
Which weren't even lights, it was just like a glow all over it.
So look, eventually the Ministry of Defence, the British Ministry of Defence, did investigate Rendlesham, and they came to the conclusion that the lights from Orford Ness Lighthouse had been responsible for what the officers saw that night. But most ufologists called bullshit on this because that could maybe explain the lights, but not the fact that something landed.
Yeah.
And something did land. And do you remember it was like triangular, it had 3 prongs. This guy, Russ Callahan, who is the one saying, I've solved the mystery of Rendlesham. He says he has a photograph of what he believes the officers saw that night in Rendlesham. According to him, on that night in 1980, the 67th Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron was based at RAF Woodbridge. And because it's a separate unit to the one at Rendlesham, he thinks neither of them would have been briefed on the other's activities. And he says this squadron was involved in the recovery of the command module capsules that were used during the Apollo moon missions, and that during the 1980s, the squadron was also used in the recovery of film that was sent back to Earth in capsules from spy satellites. So what Russ reckons is that the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron used a mock-up capsule to practice on ahead of the real deal. And he has images of the capsule that was actually used at RAF Woodbridge on the night the lights were seen at Rendlesham. And this is a quote from him. There was no Apollo in 1980, but satellite photographs were taken on film that made entry back to Earth on a mini capsule. And the ARRS, the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron, practiced on a mock-up. This is the one that was at Bentwaters, and it's in Florida now. What's interesting is it has 3 legs. The airman who saw the UFO on the first night at Rendlesham said the UFO had 3 legs. And apparently the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron did a practice run on Christmas Day night in 1980, but they ran into problems and the chopper pilot dropped the capsule in Rendlesham Forest and came back the next night to get it, which this guy Russ believes could explain the military presence in the woods. Which all sounds plausible, except why did the Ministry of Defence go with some fucking hokey lighthouse explanation if they knew about the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron? Because surely they would have known about that and just said, no, they were just doing a practice. So to me, this doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't add up either, because the guy that was in command over that period, the American, whatever he was, Air Force general, he ended up being a massive advocate for the UFO story.
So I don't think it's solved. I think there could be some kind of connection, but jury's still out for me.
Oh, wow, Michelle.
What happened last night? Was it a visit from an alien? There was an angel brood. Did he take me away in his super ship? What an alien! What an alien!
You know what? Talking about all these things like UFOs and aliens and going back to, 3-body problem where there's an imminent being 400 years away, alien invasion coming, and they're not keen on the humans anymore because they found out things about the humans that they don't like. That's part of the story, right?
Right.
They seem a bit scary because obviously they're coming and they want that planet and they don't want the humans, they don't want to coexist. But it made me think about what they might look like again. And for me, for example, whilst watching 3-Body Problem, I thought, I bet they're probably really tiny, like as big as a grain of rice or something. So I looked into movies and TV and other studies where they might come up with the idea of what an alien looks like. And we've discussed before that it might just be a gust of wind or something that we could never ever imagine, some weird thing that we can't even comprehend.
Yeah, a bit of slime.
Yeah, but there was a 2017 study published in the International Journal of Astrobiology that posits our own revolutionary theory could also apply to alien species. For example, natural selection and evolving to be fitter and stronger over time.
Of course. Now that you say it, why the fuck
Makes
not?
sense.
It really makes sense if you believe in Darwinism. If you believe in, the fact that God made us all. Different thing.
But there's a researcher called Sam Levin from Oxford's Department of Zoology who said, making predictions about aliens is difficult as we only have one example of life on Earth, to extrapolate from.
True.
And this paper that I'm talking about, it offers an alternative approach using evolutionary theory to predict silicon-based aliens that do not have DNA, for example, and might breathe nitrogen.
Of course.
So they're coming up with all the different ways that they might look like. And I saw some drawings and they looked like intricate tattoos and things like that. One looked more like a sea anemone with tiny feet at the bottom. So all kinds of unusual looking creatures. Then I looked into film. And there's a film that I have not yet seen, but I do love Denis Villeneuve as a director. He's got great films and often quite spooky and spacey. Like he did the latest Blade Runner, and he did something called Arrival, which I haven't seen, which features heptapods. So they are 7-limbed creatures that can be divided into equal parts from a common central axis, if you can imagine that. I didn't look at the pictures, but they would be radially symmetric, much like a starfish.
Okay.
And this idea came from a book by an author called Ted Chiang, who wrote the story that it was based on, the film The Arrival was based on, called The Story of Your Life. And I tried really hard to find out how Ted Chiang came up with the idea of heptapods, but it was all about language and knowing the inevitable future, and that's what the whole story is about. So I'll have to watch that film. It does look interesting, but nothing on the what they look like front. Then there's a guy called Andrew Abeta, who is professor of psychology at Rutgers University. Mm-hmm. He co-wrote a study into why some of us want to believe in aliens called We Are Not Alone. And this study says that belief in aliens is similar to being religious, Michelle. For example, it's unfounded beliefs in unfalsifiable ideas that require a leap of faith to believe, much like religion, in my mind.
I just don't
Big sigh.
know about that. I can't get on board with that because I'm not religious, and I'm definitely not thinking that I have to take a leap of faith to believe in aliens, because I still have healthy skepticism. Whereas if you're religious, you're 100% in, I believe.
Okay. Well, here's a quote from Andrew Abeta. He says, people have a need to feel like their lives are meaningful, and these beliefs might suggest that there's something bigger out there. There's something more important going on.
Look, I think that's true. I think that's why people believe in spirituality, not necessarily religion. And I do feel that people want to give their life meaning, that there is something beyond yourself, but however you translate that is a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting idea.
Yes. So if it's not religion, it'll be little green men or whatever.
Maybe.
But that doesn't stop. I mean, all of the people who have written in or rung in or contacted the X-Files of Australia only for the info to go missing, who have had legitimate, in their minds, experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you a little bit about one right now. It's the story of a 23-year-old at the time in 1977 in Vermont, USA, Terry Lovelace, and his friend and work colleague. What?
Terry Lovelace, is that a real name? That just sounds like his
porn
porn name.
It's not his porn name.
Okay.
He and his work colleague, who's only ever known as Toby throughout all the stories, had a close encounter while serving in the US Air Force once again.
Oh, the military, the bloody military. Here we go.
The bloody military. Well, listen, Terry Lovelace, I'll say his name over and over, is now 70 years old now, as of 2024, and retired from his job as Assistant Attorney General. He's also an author of Incident at Devil's Den. Now, Terry kept his abduction a secret for 40 years for fear of losing his job at the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then he obviously decided to come out and write the book. So this is what happened. Terry and Toby were on a camping trip in Devil's Den State Park in northern Arkansas. The two went on this really long walk and they were exploring the park, and then they got tired and they were resting under some trees. They fell asleep, but they hadn't put their tent up, so they woke just after dark, really freaked out, going, oh shit, we've got to get the fire and all that kind of stuff. So they got their stuff, they hurried back to their camp, got the tents up, gathered firewood for the night ahead and settled down. So then they were chatting around the fire once they got it done, and they were very aware of the din of these loud crickets and tree frogs all around them in the state park, until suddenly it went completely silent. Oof. Then they noticed in the sky 3 moving lights in the shape of a triangle low on the horizon, and the lights moved around in a really odd way that caught their attention. And then the lights began to move toward them. When the lights were right above Terry and Toby, they could see that they were coming from something so vast. It was a triangular prism as wide as 2 city blocks is how they described it. Shit. Which I find hard to imagine because I live in the suburbs. But yeah, it's enormous. So I'm just thinking for me and my other UK residents, I'm thinking maybe half of Wimbledon Common, perhaps, if that's going to put it in perspective. Or the Isabella Plantation at Richmond Park. So then a blue laser beam appeared to be scanning them. And when it stopped, they became sleepy. Then they both suddenly woke up at 3 a.m. to more strange lights and rustling around their tent. Brilliant multicolored lights illuminated the inside of their tent, and they were peering through the net tent window when Terry saw the forest behind just lit up. So then, after seeing this out the tent window, then Terry noticed that his clothes and boots were all thrown around the tent. Now remember, these guys are Air Force. They're going to be military trained. They're not going to be the sort that leave their things just flying around their tent.
No way, man. They're going to get beaten if they don't have hospital corners on their bloody sleeping bag.
Then Terry saw Toby peering out of the tent at a triangle hovering above, making a low humming noise. And then they saw what appeared to be like a dozen children walking around the meadow below the triangle.
Oh my God.
And as the creatures walked into the light, they would dissolve until they were all gone, one by one.
Holy fuck.
Terry said to Toby, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of the night? And Toby replied, they aren't little kids. Don't you remember? They took us and they hurt us.
What? Oh my God. Chill bumps.
In that moment, those words that Toby spoke to Terry sparked something inside him, and his memories began taking shape rapidly. He remembered suddenly being inside the UFO, of being taken inside this enormous craft through an intense beam of light, and witnessing dozens of other people in the craft also being experimented on by a variety of different aliens.
Oh my God.
Terry and Toby stood outside their tent in horror at what had happened. And at this point, with their memories like returning, they couldn't put them back in the box. So they made a run for it back to civilization, both suffering severe sunburn all over their bodies, including the soles of their feet.
Oh my God. Seriously, Geordie, this is really fucking freaky.
Scary, isn't it?
And this sounds like a couple of other stories that we have touched on over the years. The sunburn, the alien abduction, the rooms full of people.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So once they got back to base, the men were kept in hospital and they were suffering from dehydration. And then they were interrogated by men in black suits who called themselves special agents from OSI, which apparently stood for Office of Special Investigations. Now, I didn't chase that back to check it out. Someone else can. Go for your life. That camping trip, though, in Devil's Den changed both men's lives forever.
Yeah.
And once the US Air Force heard what had happened, both men were separated and reassigned. Terry needed to see Toby one last time. They were great friends. So he broke protocol to say goodbye. When he found Toby, he was in a terrible state. And as they hugged one last time, Toby said to Terry, "It happened, didn't it?"
Yeah.
And Terry replied, "Yes, my brother, it really happened. You're not losing your mind."
Yep.
Many years later, they've gone about their lives. Years later, Terry underwent hypnosis to help him fill in more blanks.
Oof.
And the memories of encountering the creatures while inside the UFOs came back to him. He said, "I've had 40 years of nightmares. I still have a phobia of crossing open ground. I still sleep with a light on and a gun beside my bed."
Fuck.
However, the US government, the military, and President Obama eventually acknowledged the existence of UAPs. And after that, Terry said, there's a long list of people that I'm going to email and say, I told you so.
Yeah, right.
Going back to what Obama said in 2021, he said, what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there are footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is. So it's a lot of words, Obama. I thought you were a bit more succinct than that. But what he's trying to say is there's shit up there. We don't know what it is.
There is shit up there, and good on you, fucking US government, for not destroying all your
X-Files
reports, because what happened to Australia? There's a God. America kept theirs. When all of these reports came out, and the American government did say, yes, there are things we can't explain, I think it would give you validation.
Yeah.
For sure. But these guys were next level.
And there was even more vindication for Terry that came in 2012 after physical confirmation of a fingernail-sized metal object attached to what appeared to be tiny wires was found in his leg during a routine X-ray, along with a second implant that was more petal-shaped. Yes, medical experts were completely confounded as to how it got in there, what it was, and why these devices were implanted in his leg above the knee with no external sign of them having been surgically inserted.
Oh my God.
Right?
So did they take them out? Did they test them?
I don't
Is it
know.
metal? Oh,
Don't know the answers
There's
to
so
that.
many questions, Geordie.
Like I said,
so many questions.
take Terry's name and run, if you like. It could just be that he just wants to sell more books, but this is what he's talked about, right? Interestingly, this isn't Terry's first rodeo.
Okay, here we go. Are we going to discredit Terry now?
Well, he said that as a kid in St. Louis, is how you pronounce that, in 1963, Terry said that he had regularly been visited at night by what looked like monkey men in masks wanting to play. That reminds me of the film Nope. Then in 1966, which is a few years later, he'll be a young teenager by now, while playing in his backyard, he said he saw an aluminum in American looking round craft hovering directly overhead at a low level. And then in 1975, 2 years before his experience with Toby, he was a serving pilot in the US Air Force. He and his colleagues, which include Toby, watched a triangular-shaped craft appear above a nuclear missile silo at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And in Terry's words, he says, in January 1975, our crash phone rang about 2 a.m. A missile technician servicing an ICBM, don't know what that is, fell inside a silo designated Kilo 5. The dispatch was unusually thin on facts, and the radio was unusually quiet without the routine chatter. I drove the ambulance while Toby navigated. It was 18 miles to Kilo 5 in a desolate area in the middle of a soybean field. We arrived at a chaotic scene. A dozen security police cars and 30 guys with M16s?
M16, yeah.
M16s ran around looking up. I found a captain in charge and he ordered me to park the ambulance and to stay put, in inverted commas. Then Toby noticed a matte black diamond-shaped object hovering 20 or so feet over Kilo 5. It was as big as a full-sized van. I looked for wires or some explanation as to how this thing could just sit in the midair. Mentally, it was difficult to process. We watched this thing sit for about 15 minutes, then it just shot off to the east from a dead stop to the speed of a bullet without accelerating.
Oh my God.
We were debriefed and our reports were rewritten. Our CO told us the object was an experimental helicopter and top secret. We knew back then he was full of shit and had no idea what we saw.
Yep.
We were sternly warned not to talk about it and were asked to surrender any drawings we may have made.
Jesus. They want to erase it.
After the Devil's Den incident, poor Toby, the friend, he began drinking heavily, and he was then eventually divorced and discharged from the US Air Force. And sadly, Toby died homeless on the streets in 1982.
His life was fucked up from this.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Emeritus Professor of Psychology of Goldsmiths University, London, sorry about all the big words, Christopher French, has spent years studying the paranormal and argues that sleep paralysis is a better explanation for stories like Terry's. He says, in some cases, you get associated symptoms, including a sense of presence, a very strong feeling that there's something in the room with you. He says sufferers might hallucinate and see strange lights moving around the room or strange figures or shadow people. But in Terry's case, 2 people saw it. And
yes.
As I've just said, poor old Toby, I mean, that could have happened for any number of reasons that he became homeless and died on the streets.
Yeah.
But kind of says to me that maybe what they experienced was true.
Well, I think so, because they've, like you were talking about before, it's trauma. This guy went through trauma, and I don't really know which F was his response, but...
Freeze.
Well, fucked. He was absolutely fucked after it. That's the 5th F of this trauma, because he couldn't recover. His life was fucked up from it. Poor guys.
Yeah.
Alien abduction in the most horrific way.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's a shock, isn't it? I wonder how I'll be next time I'm camping. I do sometimes think of it when there's no other people around. I like to camp where others are, you know? Nice and close to the toilet as well. I think that's important.
Yes.
Or if it's just a number 1, I'll just go out the flaps of the tent and just do it wherever. I really don't care. I'm quite willy-nilly when it comes to peeing.
I love a nature wee. I'll do it anywhere. When Andres and I had our 3-month road trip around Sweden, where we were wild camping pretty much every night. So there was no electricity. There were no other campers. It was just
Crikey.
wherever. And you just had to wee where you could find. I mean, it was absolutely such a glorious experience, but never did it occur to me that, oh my God, we're quite vulnerable up here in the middle of nowhere where there's 23.5 hours of daylight every day. Although that is quite safe.
Well, that's the thing. You've always got the daylight.
Yes, you feel
Just
safe.
don't do it when it's 23.5 hours of darkness.
Yeah, exactly.
Because also it'll be freezing.
Oh, fuck that shit. No, thank you. And I keep getting like South Park Cartman vibes here, you know.
About what?
Alien probes and that kind of thing.
Huh? Did he get probed?
Well, I feel like they could have been probed because they did say they got hurt by these aliens. They were tested on.
No, I mean Cartman.
Oh, Cartman. Didn't he have like an antenna, alien probe, like out of his butt?
I don't know. I didn't watch it.
I don't know. It was a long time ago, but my God, this whole thing, if it's true, and obviously sleep paralysis and all these other explanations, everybody wants to have an explanation, but if it's true, holy fucking shit, those poor guys, what they went through.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Well, listen, Michelle, it's been quite a wild ride, a UFO ride around the universe, this episode.
It has.
But I think it's time for us to now part ways and say nanu, nanu, and shazbutt, and all of the other alien things that I know how to say. Do you have any other alien farewells? Live long and prosper?
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't think of that one. No, I mean, Mork and Minty. What a show. That's actually a pin drop there for upcoming episode. Robin Williams, what a guy, don't you think? I'd be interested to know more about him.
Yes.
Because I think there's a bit of a wild ride there. Back to the end. There's only 3 things left to say.
Oh, back to the end. Yes, they are. Wherever you are.
Whatever you do.
Don't look up and just keep
eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping.